Hey, welcome to the Elle Russ Show, where we explore ways to get healthy, wealthy, and wise. With a combination of guest interviews and solo episodes, I hope you will be inspired and motivated to become the best of whatever you are. I'm Elle Russ, #1 best-selling author and subject expert with over a decade of helping thousands of people across the globe. Visit my website, elleruss.com, to learn more about free guides, masterclasses, online courses, and more. Enjoy the show. Hey. Okay, so obviously I'm not a psychologist. None of this is mental health advice. Please see your lawyer, doctor, pastor, therapist, whatever. But here's the thing. I'm going to talk about speaking up and how it's evolutionary, and this comes on the heels of nuances and avenues of this topic that keep coming up with people who are afraid to speak up, and it's usually with particular personalities, and I'm one of them. So I'm a personality who is super alpha. If you've listened or heard me speak at all, you're like, yeah, that bitch means business, right? But I'm not an asshole, bully, horrible, mean-spirited people confuse bold, outspoken, direct communicators as somehow possibly also being bullies, because often bullies misuse their confidence. So they also have the qualities that I have, right? But then they're also jerks, yelling at people, blowing up, flying off the handle, and that kind of garbage that are not characteristics of confident people, right? So I'm that kind of personality. I can be intimidating to a lot of people. I know I have been before. And there are people. Here's what's crazy about it. It's not really who I am. It's the perception of the other person. Direct communicators like me, are not intimidated by people like me because we're all the same. What makes us different? I'm going to give you the insights on how it works on our end. I want to jump into some evolutionary psychology on this because unfortunately, society, people in general, now there's cultural exceptions and other things, but people look down upon those who can't speak up for themselves. And why is that? And we're going to get into that today too. Also, how many times, just to look at oneself, how many times have you told someone advice about speaking up? Like, well, you need to say this, but you yourself would not take that very advice. That right there also goes to show you know what's authentically the thing to do, yet you don't do it yourself. But the reason you're suggesting it is because you know that that's the truth. So sometimes there is a big conflict between what you perceive and tell others they should do about speaking up and how you then respond in the same scenarios. So I'm also not saying choose every battle. I'm not saying speak up at every single moment. Okay. But if you come across a strong alpha type personality who's not like a horrible, obvious bully, male or female, I'll just take let's talk about a fictional character. We'll call her Betty. Betty's a super alpha female boss, CEO type, no shit, kind of like me. But she's not like throwing around, stuff around the office and screaming people and, belittling people and gaslighting people, right? She's just a strong, direct person. Reasonable. Okay, so people who are not like Betty, who work for Betty, are going to be afraid to ask Betty for a raise or for vacation dates, or maybe even for clarification on a report they're doing or some sort of project, but they're too afraid to ask. Okay, because they'll feel dumb or like the person's going to chastise them. So usually what in my experience, when I'm coaching or talking with anyone, I could just not even be like actual life coach. It could be anyone on the street or a conversation with anybody. If I suggest that, hey, someone should speak up, right? Like in this scenario with Betty, for vacation days or something, I might say, well, just go to Betty and say this, that, and the other. And they'll go, I know, but like, I'm afraid. And this is always my response to them. It's, I know you're afraid, but Betty only admires and respects people who aren't afraid of Betty. Let me repeat that. The person who's like, oh, I really want to ask Betty for a raise or vacation days or whatever, but And I know I need to say that. I know, but I'm scared. It's like, I know you're scared, but Betty only admires and respects people who aren't afraid of Betty. Look, if you're out there and you're afraid to speak up to someone, we are not talking about some horrible, abusive asshole type, okay? Those people are just unreasonable bullies, right? I'm talking about just strong personalities like mine. This rings true for me. Now, of course, I have a lot of clients when I do life coaching that aren't necessarily at this stage, and they're coming out of being a people pleaser. They are dealing with self-esteem and confidence issues. That's why they come to me. They're trying to gain some sort of they're trying to gain the confidence to be authentic. Now, I don't look down upon them for that, right? Okay, I'm not actively like, ew, with my client, right? But it is an act of truth telling of like, the reason they're coming to me is because that behavior backfires on your life and you never get what you want. And so that's why they're coming to me, and then they know it's tough and it is intimidating. But there's no way out of this but through it. We have to call out the truth of it. So that side of you're never going to get what you want because you can't speak up or you're too afraid. But then it's like, okay, are you still complaining or allowing this thing you're not speaking up about to affect your happiness? Are you complaining about this circumstance that you're too afraid to speak up about? And how is this not speaking up about it affecting you? Because it's probably like a record in your head that's fearful of something in the future that you could clarify, right? I want to go on vacation. I don't know if Betty's going to allow it. I want to ask for a raise. She'll probably rip me a new one. Okay, so and the thing is that I'll talk about this more, but most of the time, like that does not happen because see, the Betty or the Jim or whatever, right? They will only respect your shit and think of you as an equal if you speak up to them. And Jim and Betty are not actually that scary. I mean, look, my confidence clients or past life coaching clients can tell you that. They can tell you they might have been intimidated by me a little bit at first, or they might have judged me, but realized I had something they didn't. And this goes the same for me and people who had the ability to be vulnerable. I would look at that in the past as something that was weak or made me feel uncomfortable in some way, like like a judgmental way towards them about wearing their heart on their sleeve, or not that like you should. I'm just saying the reason I believe I looked at it that way is because it was a skill I was lacking. That's an actual strength that I saw as a weakness. It wasn't until I adopted it into my life, forced through shitty things happening as a result of not being vulnerable, right? So the reason people come to me, or the reason, you can think about it in this way, is we still have to call out the truth of it, right? Like, I get it that you'd be uncomfortable with someone like me. I'd also get it that you would want to adopt some of these things because it is more confident and you do end up getting more of what you want. And I understand that it's uncomfortable. Just realize it's coming from a place of judging me for it. You're judging us direct communicators as being someone that is actually abrasive when we have no emotion behind the things we're saying. I'm not scary at all. I'm a love bug. People who know me know this. They know, look, I love it when someone speaks up and just calls it out. I love it. And also, what you have to understand, like sometimes the Betty, the Jim, whatever, me, strong personalities, very alpha, direct communicators. We say stuff without emotion, but people interpret it with emotion. So we say things just very matter of fact and direct, just like I said that. And that can come off as being mean or insensitive, or people perceive it as like, there's just some shock or uncomfortability. So, like, let's break it down. I think being direct is fucking awesome, but listen, it's not always, it doesn't always work. You got to gauge your audience, right? But you're getting the straight up truth every time dealing with a direct communicator. It's ultra authentic. That's why it's related to confidence, because confident people are authentic naturally because they do tell it like it is. They're very direct. Okay, so let's just say you're dealing with a Betty or a Jim. They're not bullies. But here's the thing. Alphas in general usually as we are uncoached youths, we can misuse our confidence and have the tendency to bully or have it within us. So therefore, unfortunately, a Betty or a Jim who may not be a bully, but if they perceive someone's weakness, whether it's professional or even just, by the way, could be in social situations. Like literally, this does not have to be in the workplace, right? This could be just a social situation, social hierarchy situation where there's a Jim or a Betty. And if they perceive weakness in someone else, it will subconsciously lend itself to allowing them to treat that person perhaps with disrespect or not admiring them or overseeing things. I'm not saying that's right at all. I'm not saying the person deserves it, and it certainly is not fucking acceptable. I'm just telling you how this goes down. Because if you're on the other side of the Bettys or the Jims or whatever, you need to up level. A lot of people feel that the Bettys and the Jims don't like them, so they're afraid of them. They don't like me. That's usually in a social situation. Oh, I'm afraid of so and so. Like they don't really like, they're really nice to me. And you're like, well, I don't want to be like, well, why do you think that? It's not acceptable that that person is not nice to them. But I see it for what it is. It's like, oh, because you are the person that's afraid of that person. First of all, they're probably sensing some shit about that. You know what I mean? Like that stuff, you can't just like bottle it, right? If you're feeling that way about me, if you're afraid of me or you're intimidated by me, likely I'm going to perceive it. It's okay. I'm not going to be mad about it, but like I'll probably still perceive it. So they might subconsciously perceive that and some kind of bad vibe towards them about it, right? Like, oh, they're so mean, right? And is it fueling that dynamic then, right? For them to sort of be more egoistic around that person. Again, not acceptable. I'm just telling you, it's just human stuff, right? Human behavior. So, why, like, and again, like, why would someone, it's not fair that Betty or Jim would treat someone differently or with a lack of respect just because they sense a weakness in them, right? But it's evolutionary, and I'm going to get into that in a minute. So, if you're afraid to speak up, I can guarantee you that they're probably sensing this about you. They know this about you. You're giving an air about them that understands this. Therefore, you in order to get further or get what you want out of the situation, you're ultimately going to have to speak up. So we sense it, and that would make it worse for you. Here are some insights. We've got evolutionary psychology at play here. There are survival and social hierarchies, right? So from an evolutionary perspective, anyway, being able to assert yourself is associated with strength, dominance, leadership. Those are the qualities that, well, historically anyway, right? They improved someone's chances of survival, reproduction. The other evolutionary part of this is like those who weren't speaking up or the ones who were perceived as weaker or less capable, right? Then you wouldn't feel like they could contribute to the group's success, right? Like you're not gonna fucking contribute to this shit. Like you're fucking useless, right? That might be the perception, right? From an evolutionary survival social hierarchy type of situation. There's social psychology, like social norms and expectations. There are certain societal values in certain areas or cultures that might reward assertiveness and self-expression, and ones that might say, no, don't. Even religious aspects, the way you were raised. And again, so, like no one's deserving any of this. But in evolutionary psychology, if you are a person with low self-esteem, a people pleaser, maybe you don't have to be, but just still maybe shy or afraid of a person that you need to speak up to. Again, assuming they're not like a murderer and they're abusive, like, okay, but just these, strong personalities. Like, I can totally see why someone would be afraid to speak up to me. I totally see it. But I also, it's so funny because it's just not me or the way in which I would present something. I talk about this, I think, in my second book, but I certainly in my confidence course, back when I was like 22 years old and I used to be a technical like recruiter, account manager, There was a secretary receptionist person who works at our company, and sometimes if we need to call her for something, right? Like we need to be connected to someone else or whatever, a report or print up something, whatever it was. So I would just, pick up the phone, she'd answer, and I'd go, "Oh, hey, can you get me the blah 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 blah?" But she was like so offended by this. She was completely the opposite personality. And I realized quickly that I needed to preface my conversations with her more. She couldn't, I had to gauge my audience. I need to adjust myself for that audience because over time, that's just better communication, right, in the workplace. So I would call and I would be like, "Oh, hey, Lori, how's your day? How's it going? Oh yeah, how's your husband? Whatever, just a little something. It's not fake. It's just courteous to them. However, then my boss at that company and then my future boss slash mentor, Mark Sisson, both very direct. Uh, Worked out great. I vibe with those people, and from our perspective, the I think the reason we like it so much is A, there's no bullshit involved, there's no fluff. Get to the point, let's move, let's get on it, and knock it out, get it done. Because confident, direct communicators are often also ambitious, right? So we're like, yeah, let's get the shit done. But that's not cool a lot of times too. So that's the growth that we have to do on our side as alphas over time and kind of grow up and get coached where we understand these things. So yeah, fear, cultural background. The other thing too is, like what about confirmation bias? If let's say a person is perceived as shy or passive, then others may kind of look for evidence to confirm that. So then that would further kind of embed or like entrench that negative perception right there. Excuse me. So let's talk about self concept. There's self perception. So let's talk about self concept and authenticity. So, like being able to express yourself is closely tied to your self concept, the concept of yourself, and also authenticity, like who you truly are. Are you being authentic and in line with the concept of yourself? When when you can't, then it's kind of perceived as a failure to be authentic, or or like right, it could be both, a failure to realize maybe your potential. That's why it's perceived in that way. So that's why when people can't do it and can't speak up, it's perceived as that. And there's a lot of truth to that. Look, sometimes people project their own insecurities onto others, right? If someone's feeling insecure about their own ability to assert themselves, they might judge others harshly or might feel better about their shortcomings. You could have learned this stuff. Don't speak up. Better not to say anything. Don't rock the boat. You know what I mean? There's internal conflicts, of course, unresolved issues from childhood, maybe stuff in your past, things that have taught you maybe it's better to just, you know, uh, not assert yourself because when you do, this happens. Did you see someone assert themselves and it went down badly? And you're like, nope, not doing that. Look at that a lot, by the way. Just side note, things you're like that you've witnessed that then you made a conclusion from, like, aha, well, now that I saw that happen, better believe that's going to happen to me. Or, one of those things that behind those are usually some character defects within ourselves. I have come to learn from personal exploration. So, do you need to go to therapy? Do you need coaching? Do you just need self discovery? Do you need to take a course? There's communication styles. A more reserved style could be interpreted as a lack of confidence, but those are some dynamics around not speaking up or why you wouldn't speak up. It's this instinctual thing to speak up and you're not. It goes against what's happening within you. It feels wrong. It's like you might be seen as incompetent, but you're not. Maybe you're competent, but you're being perceived in a certain way because of your inability to speak up. Are there perceptions of you that are doubled on top of this perception of your inability to speak up for yourself that's hurting you further? The reason I'm sharing all this is because I am Betty and Jim. You know what I mean? Like, I I know what it's like. I can see it. I've come across fellow super direct people, and even I have been like, hold on a minute, and I'm like, oh no, no, they're just like me. But I've even had a moment like, are this motherfucker judging me? Are they being an asshole? And then I'm like, oh no, they're just direct. Okay. But here's the thing. I actually had a scenario once where someone was being very direct with me and I didn't know them very well. And I couldn't tell whether their factual directness, it literally, because they were just matter of fact saying things, I couldn't tell whether they were judging my situation or just presenting information. And I said to them, because I'm direct, I said, hey, I can't tell. Are you fucking judging me right now? Or are you like just being a direct communicator? And they're like, oh my God, no, 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 I was just so sorry. And they're like, I get that a lot. Mm-hmm. Yep. So do I. That's the work we have to do as direct communicators, you know? Because when we're not in professional environments, I mean, I'm still direct with my friends. I'm completely direct with all of everyone I know. But you still have to gauge the audience. And I think that's the constant game that people like me, the Bettys, the Jims, people just are direct, straight up, no shit people. That's kind of the game we're constantly playing is gauging the audience, making sure there's appropriate prefaces or clarity around delivering information. So I do what I can when I can, and sometimes I'm like, ah, shit, I blew that one. They probably think I'm a dick. Let me clarify that, right? So it happens to me. And again, in the same look, I feel the same way though with people that have the inability to speak up. There are things that we could learn because, again, diplomacy can be learned from that. Alphas need to maybe like sit and think, be a little bit more diplomatic. I understand how it can come across abrasive. My family and I are very direct communicators, so like if my mom called me today and I was interrupted and had to go, I would just be like, oh, hey, mom, I gotta go. Call you later. Bye. Click. No one's offended. No one's like, how dare you hang up like that and just be, it's just no. And someone heard me do that and they were like, oh my God, did you just like hang up on your mom? And I was like, no, but that's how we do it. And it's literally not even offended at all. I have one friend like that who is the same way too. She'll just be like, "Oh, hey, look, I gotta go. Talk to you later. Love you, bye." And like hang up, and I'm just like, "Okay, that's it." But I get why people are like, "That sucks," and you're like, "But it's just so to us, it's like, yeah, but it's just so straight and to the point and fucking honest. Like, it's not. Do you know what I mean? I'm not going to spend 2 minutes trying to wind down a conversation with you. I'm just like, hey, look, I got to go. I'll call you later. Bye. Like, why are you offended by that? Look at that. I don't know. It's just but again, a direct line of communication, it can, in just a matter of fact tone, can be perceived differently from non-direct communicators, and it can be perceived as a negative, obviously. Um, I see the perspective on my directness and in general, the Bettys and the Jims. One of my best examples is Mark Sisson. He's very much like me. I worked with him for many, many years, and we have the same no shit, very direct way of communicating. It worked out very well. Um, but I don't think some other people that worked with us maybe weren't that way and had to adjust to that. But let's say Mark called me while I was working for him and I saw that he was calling. I would literally just pick up the phone and be like, yo, what you got? Yo, what do you need? I don't pick up the phone and be like, "Hey, how's it going? Good. How's your day? So what's going on?" Like it's just like literally that direct. Same thing. Um, I think he loved that. I mean, I know he loved that, but because he's so direct and wants to get to the point, you know what I mean? So he probably has to do the same thing I do, which is like preface certain things with other people. But for the direct communication of the world, he can just call up and go, "Hey, look, I get on, you can do this, that, the other." And you're like, "Okay, great, done, bye." Like, we're out of here. We don't have to sit here and lollygag around. And you might go, "God, but that's rude. And it's not any pleasantries. And like, it's so brutal." And I so understand that. Like, I see the other side of it too. I can just tell you, though, from the advantage of someone who is a direct communicator who embodies it, it is a way fucking easier life where you get more of what you want. And people respect and admire you more. And you have more confidence and self esteem because you're just authentically expressing yourself. And I'm not saying to do this all the time. I talk in my book and my course on confidence. I mean, take my confidence masterclass. It's a really good one because it's juicy, juicy video tutorial for me on all sorts of these examples. But like, you gotta you gotta question why you're affected by that. And I had to question why I would be affected by someone who maybe wasn't as confident, but was very vulnerable. So I've had that where I've judged someone else for their vulnerability and then been like, oh my God, in hindsight, I think I judged them because it's what I wanted. So ask yourself, are you judging the people like me or the Bettys or the Jims or the Mark Sissons or any direct communicator you know? Are you judging us because it's something you secretly want and admire and you just maybe haven't put your finger on it yet, but you're currently just judging it? Sometimes that's the case. And again, I'm not saying everyone wants to be like me. Hopefully you're not misinterpreting this whole podcast episode, right? It's for you to see the perspective of a serious, brutally direct communicator who's confident. On that note, just side note too, on that, is that, over the years, you're too direct, you're too this, you're too that, right? And Tanya Stewart Dyer, one of my best friends, who's an alpha women coach and just understands alphas a lot, she often talks about this subject. You can look into some of her work more there. And also Allison Armstrong, probably the top choice there for just primal male-female dynamics and some communication, interesting communication things with her, but usually with romantic relationships for her. So to me, the hey, what's up? Just get to the fucking point is so clear, so smooth. I notice too sometimes, not just necessarily me, but working with Mark, I noticed some people would make comments, whether it was in their social spheres or someone working for him, where they felt intimidated to speak up. And when they did, if they did, they were like, "Oh, that didn't go bad." It's like, yeah, it doesn't go bad. It's not because the person who is afraid to speak up is assuming that it's going to be a contentious reaction to the thing they're speaking up about, and that's a misperception. It's usually the opposite. And then the person's like, oh my God, that wasn't so bad. Like they're really like actually nice and reasonable. And you're like, yeah. And they respect the shit out of you now because you spoke up. So now they have a different impression of you. And usually it's that moment. I'll say it for me because I'm talking about the internal workings of someone feeling this way. But like when someone speaks up, first of all, I can perceive, if you are a person coming to speak up to me, I can perceive whether you're comfortable with it or not. If I perceive that you're comfortable with it, then you are likely a direct communicator, and I will be able to see that we are of the same. But if you're not, and you're coming to speak up to me, and you're not a direct communicator, I will be able to tell that. And when you do speak up, I will be ultra fucking impressed. I will have a new impression of you suddenly. I will, right? Again, not every single scenario you've ever heard of in your life. This is sort of how it works. And so think about that, because maybe I have diffused the fear for you a little bit in speaking up to people like me. And, the directness is really not coming from emotion. It's really not. It's coming from, again, feeling like you're going to get a reaction that's abrasive. It's usually the opposite. You assume more. And I think what people find out is all of their assumptions were likely really just misgauged. You're almost expecting something. You're assuming failure. You're assuming it's going to go wrong. But we have the minds when we're speaking up, like, fuck it, doesn't matter if it goes wrong. Who gives a shit? Just ask. What do you care? Who cares? So what? But at least you spoke up. You took a shot. That's how we think about speaking up. So if you're compromised in this area, then you're going to want to approach speaking up in a tiptoe type of way. You don't want to approach something with fear and anxiety. You might want to try to practice with, smaller things first, but you got to speak up. You'll see you're going to get an easier reception, a better reception. Start speaking up in life. You're going to build the confidence. It's compounded. Speak up small about the poorly cooked steak at the restaurant and then go from there. If you're so shy and can't speak up, you start small. There's stages of this. And I'm going to just leave you with what I expressed at the beginning, which is you might be afraid of Jim or Betty or me. You might be afraid of speaking up to us. But the truth is that we really only, respect and admire and trust the people that aren't afraid of us. Not because again, that sounds kind of bad, but again, it's that evolutionary perceived. Are they going to, like, this is a survival thing. So understanding the evolutionary part of it can help you come out of it and realize that you have to take the shot. And look, sometimes shutting up is survival too, right? If you're being held at gunpoint as a hostage, you better believe I'm shutting the fuck up. I'm not going to say a damn thing. You know what I mean? So we're not talking about extreme scenarios. We're usually, we're talking about these everyday things, speaking up to, right, like an in-law or a friend or a boss or, right, a controlling parent. It's any situation. It's personal. It can be romantic. It can be just, work-related, career. It could be to your doctor. Talk about a lot about that in the paleothyroid solution. And also, listen, you can have this lack of confidence in speaking up in one area and not others. So I want you to take a look at that because I had no problem speaking up in my life in every fucking area of my life except for romantic relationships. Had an issue there. I had some lingering shame. I talk about this in part 4 of my book, Confident as Fuck. That part of the book is called Shame Disables Confidence. So maybe you need to do some replaying of some past situations where you didn't speak up and you regret it. What would you do now? How would it go? So replay that in your mind. Get to a point of feeling good. And that'll just sort of like going through the motions of that if you don't have a current situation. Can you speak up? Speaking up is not just for getting something you want. I mean, it's all getting something you want, right? But it could be to get help. It could be to get clarity about something. It could just be to get information. It could really be, there's all levels of where people feel choked up about speaking up. So all I can say is that this is definitely I feel it's a better life because I don't suffer with communication because I am direct. And then I don't walk away from lots of communication. Actually, almost never walk away from communications offended. If you are often feeling offended, that's a red flag because you're finding reasons to be, usually. And I think we've all been there at some point, but that's something to look at. Okay, so one of the best things you can do if you want more juicy stuff on this is check out my confidence masterclass because that one is just a really super juicy tutorial, 90 minutes, going through lots of specific examples. It's fun, a lot of stories, things to wrap your head around real life situations. And if you want to go beyond that and take my ultimate confidence course, you can. But check out the confidence masterclass, get a little mini version of it and dive into this arena because the more confident, self-assured, self reflection that you're able to do is going to be your ultimate life enhancer. And speaking up is such a cornerstone of confidence, authenticity. And when you're aligned and like in line with your authentic self, who you are, your concept of yourself, I could tell you it's a better life. I have so many regrets about the shame affecting my speaking up in certain scenarios. I lost out on deepened friendships as a result. I had many failed romantic relationships as a result because I was too afraid to speak up and be vulnerable and be open about my shit. And you know what? That's why I'm doing the work I'm doing too. So you don't end up wasting a couple decades of your life finding a missing piece. Man, I just had one piece over here. I thought I was shuffling that shit under the rug. So for me, even, and you might be like, what? You were afraid to speak up? Yeah. But just there. Like, I know people that are not afraid to speak up in romantic relationships, the opposite of what I was, but they can't speak up at work. So again, it's like I talk about with confidence in general, and this is a repeater, I've said this many times, you can be confident in one area and another. You can like not be able to talk to girls, but be ultra confident in the boardroom at business. You can be ultra confident on stage as a comedian, but get off stage and be very shy and not even be able to deal with people like that. There can be some contrasting, strange things like that. But if you are feeling any of these things, anything resonated with you in this episode, then you jump into this, get into the confidence masterclass and just jump into this game because it's so freeing. And I tell you what, I'm with my fiance, and I will do a whole episode on that at some point. But my fiance is a very direct communicator, and it is just so great. There's no hidden resentments. No one's walking around in a bad mood or on eggshells because someone didn't say something that they want to say and they're mad and they're carrying around that fucking energy. Like, it is so good. It is so easy. Most of my friendships, even if the people didn't turn out to be direct communicators, and I may have attracted them as a friend because I needed to learn stuff from them and they needed to learn confidence from me. Over time, through our friendship, they do speak up to me. Which is great. And again, they're almost practicing that, not like consciously, but could be. And vice versa. I'm not the oracle everyone comes to. Everyone that comes to me, like, I learned something from them. That's really the truth. So when I talk about confidence, I'm like, I'm not like the high horse oracle on the mount, people coming to visit me. I learned so much valuable shit from the people that couldn't speak up. I talk about that in my book and elsewhere. So if that's you, you have value to us too. Don't think we're just like the teachers, but just know that adopting this way of life, usually easier, less regrets. All right, everyone, I'll see you next week. Hey, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this show, I would so appreciate you leaving a review on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And to learn more about partner discounts on amazing products, visit ellruss.com/discounts.